Okay, so welcome to movements that occur around the hip. The hip is part of the posterior chain. The posterior chain is made up of the hamstrings, the glutes, and the lower back. The hamstrings attach to your pelvis. Right underneath your glute, if you put your hand on your butt and you push into the back, you'll feel a little bone. And in that little bone, it's called the ischium. And in the ischium, your hamstrings attach to that ischium. So if I want to work my hamstrings, it makes sense that if this is my point of my ischium here, if I lift this up into the ceiling, you can see how I'm going to stretch the back of my hamstrings. If I keep this here, but I bend over, can you see how that's not actually moved? So I can bend over and not work my hamstrings, or I can bend over and work my hamstrings. Do you see how by driving my hips up, like I'm taking a bow, if I lift my pelvis upwards, I'm going to stretch the hamstrings. One of the most fundamental mistakes people make when they're working with the Romanian deadlift and posterior chain exercises is their inability for their brain to associate the movement of the pelvis. If you don't have the ability to do this, push back, squeeze, push back. When I push back, I can push back, 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 back. I'm going to feel a stretch in my hamstrings. So what we want to do is try and get your brain to practice this movement. But at the same time, we've got to integrate the rest of the spine. Because I can lift this up and I can still round my back and I can still make a mess of it. So grab a PVC pipe or a broomstick without the broom on the end of it. We want to attach this to our spine. We're going to attach it to the lower back where there's a little groove in your back, there's a little curve. And then there's also a curve in your neck. And what we want to have is 3 points of contact, my head, my shoulders, and my butt. From this position here, I'm not going to have my hand there because I want you to see. Normally my hand would be here to make sure that I can keep the 3 points of contact. And all we're going to do, see how my hips go up. If I push my hips back, I get that 3 points of contact. Keep my chin tucked in. If my chin is too far away, the gap's too big. If my bum's too high up, the gap's too big. So I want to keep a nice neutral spine, nice neutral neck. We want to create that 3 points, head, shoulder, and butt. Push the butt up, push the butt back, keep the chin tucked in. We're going to go all the way down as far as we can. You should start to feel the hamstrings stretch. We're going to come back up again, squeeze the butt is fine. Push back up, drive up through your hips, push back, stretch the hamstrings. The knees are soft. Lift, squeeze, push up. See how I engage through my pelvis? I lift, 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 lift to here. If you bend over and you start to come here and you lose that position here, you need to stick your butt up. You've got to push back here. It's very difficult for a lot of people to associate movements that occur around the hips because they're not used to it. They're used to just bending over. Some people, they just focus on the objective of the task, which may just be to just bend over and stand back up again. What you can also do is if you're near a wall, is stand close to the wall, stick your butt up and try and touch the wall with your butt. Lift your hips up to the ceiling, touch the wall. If it's comfortable, you walk forwards, push back, push back, push back. And you'll notice that I'm driving upwards. I'm not trying to push backwards with my butt, I'm going up and away. So I'm taking a bow and I'm driving my hips to the ceiling. Once you get more comfortable with that, you can then start to think about the PVC pipe. 3 points of contact, chest, chin in, chest up, push back. Once you feel you've mastered that, you just change the position of the PVC pipe. And it's exactly the same. Chin tucked in, chest lifted, you raise your hips to the ceiling. You should feel a pull in your hamstrings. What we're trying to do is go as low. I don't like using the word low. Try and think about as going high as you can with your hips. I'm trying to take my hips, because my hamstrings connect to my hips, I'm trying to take my hips up and away. And that's going to help me stretch my hamstrings, as opposed to focusing on going low, because sometimes people get a little overzealous and they'll try and think about going as low as they can, and they end up not working the hamstrings. They're working the small muscles in the spine. So hips go up, go up, go up, and as far as you can possibly go with a stretch. Obviously with a little bit of load, you might go a little bit lower as well. But as you stretch, if you cannot get past your knees, you cannot do the deadlift. It's very, very simple. My rule of thumb is if you cannot get the bar past your knees, you cannot do a deadlift, because the deadlift requires the knees to bend after the bar. So from a deadlift perspective, we're here, we're going to come forwards and down. What I want to do is clear that knee so I can bend the knee and the bar continues going straight down. I'm going to talk about the deadlift in more detail later on in another video. For now, if you can't get past that knee, You need to work on mobility, flexibility, and just getting yourself into this position and stretching as much as you can. And again, I'll talk about exercises and mobility drills for improving your hamstring flexibility. In the meantime, what I want you to do is get the brain to associate with the hips, to get the brain to associate with the hamstrings. You want to lift the hips to the ceiling, stretch the hamstrings. Stand back up again. You can squeeze the butt. Right now, I'm not interested in the glutes. Lift, 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 lift. Stretch the hamstrings. Come back up again. Tall posture. Nice, keep your chin tucked in. I don't really want this behavior. Just try and keep your chin tucked in, looking straight ahead of you. If you need to, use a PVC pipe, 3 points of contact to make sure that the back stays straight. If you can't maintain the 3 points of contact, don't do the exercise yet. You've got to get the 3 points of contact first. In summary, number one, just get your brain to focus on the driving up and pushing back of the pelvis. Once we've mastered this quite comfortably, we then want the PVC pipe behind the back, the 3 points of contact, head, shoulders, and hips. We want to bend over with the PVC pipe. If this is comfortable, come to the front. If this is a difficult position to be in, you've got to work on flexibility and mobility, which will come later. If you can't get the hips, if you can't maintain the 3 points of contact, do not bring the PVC pipe in front. You've got to work on that position. You've got to work on getting your brain to associate here. Number one, PVC pipe. Number two, replace the PVC pipe. Number three. Once you've mastered those and you're comfortable, then you can start loading the bar. If you go past your knee, you can go down to the floor, but that's going to come up in another video. What I would do is focus on the Romanian deadlift, get that posterior chain. The difference between the Romanian deadlift and a deadlift is very, very little. You're going to get so much stress, into positive stress in the back, the hamstrings, and the glutes. Just from the Romanian, you don't need to go to the one, you don't need a deadlift. Two, you don't need to deadlift to the ground. A lot of people lack the flexibility to go to the floor anyway. So practice your Romanian deadlifts. Number one, number two, number three. I should have just done a video on that. Anyway, that's the posterior chain. I'm now going to move on to glutes in the next coming video. Thank you for your time.